If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing to the channel. When you do, make sure you hit the notification bell. That means that you will be informed of when a new video has been released. If you would like to take that support one step further, you can do that via Patreon, which is an optional monthly service. You can donate money towards the channel, or you can go over to Ko-fi.com, and for the price of a coffee, you can help donate towards the channel as well. Links for all of those will be in the description of the video. And without further ado, enjoy the video.
We're good to go.
Happy days. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be listening to another episode of the Non League Nosh. I am James, and as always, I'm joined by my colleague and good friend Adam. Before I ask you how you are, I have to say, happy birthday.
Oh, it's a special podcast, isn't it, James?
I know, it is your birthday. How has today been?
Different.
I bet it's been weird.
Yeah, a birthday in lockdown isn't quite the same, really, is it? Like Marnie came earlier to drop my card off, and we were literally just out the front of the house sorting something out, and she sort of had to frisbee it onto the grass for me to then sort of jog after to pick up to ensure the social distancing was maintained. So yeah, a bit odd all round, but I've been spoilt. Had some nice cake. Sent you a picture of my cake, didn't I, James?
Did you?
I sent it to you the other day.
I don't know.
The one that my mum made for me. The boobs.
I could. Oh yes, yeah. I do remember that. Sorry, yeah.
That was class, and my little one liked it.
Good.
So yeah.
Sign for things to come in the future. Hey, but anyway, let's move on. I am absolutely delighted to announce today's guest. When we announced that we had you coming on, John, the response that we got on Twitter and the number of questions that we have got for you towards the end of the show, I haven't seen anything like it on the podcast. This is, I'm hoping, it's just going to be absolutely amazing. But yes, for those of you who are not familiar with the SIL scene, we have Sporting 87 manager Jon Warnock on the show. John, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you finding things in lockdown at present? Are you kind of coping well with it? What's your current situation at the moment?
Like everybody, I'm pretty frustrated. So much so that I've taken to doing a bit of DIY, which I haven't done for the last 20 odd years. So it shows you how bad things are, really. The ultimate thing would be if I started shopping, but which we can't actually let us do. So, I mean, if I started shopping, you'd know I'd really lost it. But things I don't normally do.
The thing of this lockdown is it's like the absolute, I call them partner jobs, where your other half comes up with a job that there's no way in hell they will do, but it gets delegated to you.
Oh yeah,
and they're just nonsense jobs. Wouldn't it be a good idea if we sort out the garden? What that translates down to is
you're going to sort the garden out.
yeah. So there's a lot of partner jobs going on.
Yeah.
In fairness, I don't think I've done my fair share over the years, so I think it's just payback, if I'm honest.
Now, you don't have to go into the full kind of details with your job for obvious reasons, but are you kind of able to work from home as things stand? Are you able to do much, or is what
I'm working from home. Yeah. I'm sort of trying to spend one day working or do a couple of days working and then take a day off and do the jobs around the house, do a bit of DIY, do a bit of gardening, just to get a bit of a pattern to the day. Otherwise, what you end up doing is just working all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm trying to chunk my days up, really, and that worked for me.
Definitely. So what we normally do, John, I don't know if you are familiar with the show. I think you've listened to one or two based on what you like the day. We go through a couple of questions to begin with, just to kind of get the audience knowing you a little bit more. And then we want to talk mainly about the non-league scene, because there's been a lot of updates recently, hasn't there, Adam, regarding football, especially in this country. We'll talk about the SIL, and then we've got I think we're going to have to dedicate basically half the show answering the Twitter questions, but we'll get onto those later on. So let's start off with the with the set of questions we always have at the beginning. Pub, bar, or club?
Pub.
I had a feeling that would be the case. Chinese or Indian?
Indian.
Oh, interesting.
You know what? That one I had the other night, James. Forgot to
Yeah.
tell you that was flipping good. That might have been the start of swaying me the other way.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Try the Spice Garden in Bury. They're really good.
There you go. Smells like
Okay. There's a venue.
yeah.
They'll give me a discount next time I go in there. Now I've said that.
And if you want to sponsor the podcast, you know where to come as well. We'll price you all you want on that. Tea or coffee?
Tea, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not a fan of tea. I can't understand it. Favorite biscuits, Dunk?
Digestive.
Standard digestive. Interesting. I'm going to ask this one, but I'm not entirely sure if I'll get an answer. Instagram or Twitter? Do you have?
I'm on neither.
I do think you would be.
I was desperately trying to find you to tag you into things the other day. I was like, "It's definitely not here, is he?"
No, I'm not on it. I don't know. It's just me.
Not your thing then.
No.
Nah, fair enough. Favorite music genre? What type of music you into?
Oh, I've got a wide mix. I'm a big U2 fan though.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
That type of music.
Yeah, big U2.
Fair enough. Favorite box set?
Favorite box set? I think I like AJ now at the moment. I used to like watching the lighter, some of the lighter weights rather than the heavyweights. Do you know what I mean? Some of McGuigan. I like watching McGuigan.
He said box set, not boxer.
Oh, boxing. Oh, right.
I didn't know how long to keep you going for. I'm killing myself sat
Do you
here.
know what? I thought maybe when he was talking about Ajaz, well, maybe there's a new Netflix documentary I just don't know about, and I was just like, I'm just going to let him continue. But
Oh, box set. I honestly don't watch box sets.
no,
I couldn't tell you. No, I haven't watched a box set. No.
Listen
fair enough.
I watch a bit. I do watch programs, but I wouldn't watch it. No.
No, that's fair enough. And favorite film? Do you have a favorite film? Then let's move on to that one.
I watch quite a lot of films. I like Woody Allen films. Films that are just a little bit. I watched the other night. It's just all football related. I did watch the Leeds film, Damned United. That was really good.
Yeah,
I enjoyed watching. Early in the lockdown, on the telly they did all the. There was a series of films I watched, and I thought they were really good. But I don't. Yeah.
Fair enough. Damned United is currently on iPlayer at the moment, so if anyone is looking for something to watch over the next few weeks, get on it because it is a bloody good film if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's a really good film.
Cats or dogs?
Well, I've got a cat, just about. But yeah.
Sky or BT?
I've got BT. I think I prefer Sky. I've got Sky Sports News, but I haven't got the full Sky package. But I would prefer Sky.
Yeah. I think everyone would if they could afford it. Other than football, favourite sport? Do you have any other?
I don't mind watching cricket. I like cricket. I've spent some time in America. I love baseball. I find I do watch quite a bit of baseball on TV actually on the various channels. I quite like baseball.
Second person that's into baseball.
That's really tactical and it's really interesting when you get into it. It's great.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have said golf, haven't they, Adam?
Yeah.
I'm not a golfer at all.
Right, let's move on to some football ones. Football TV support.
Ipswich.
Yeah, well, there you go. And we'll get on like a house on fire. Favourite player growing up?
Paul Mariner.
Good shout. To be fair, can't argue with that. Best player you've seen live?
Well, if you don't count the Ipswich ones, because I think Muir and Tyson, the Mariner, Jon Warnock and all that lot, they were exceptional. People don't realise how good they were. I did actually see Johan Cruyff at Ipswich in the 70s, because Ipswich played Barcelona. And Ipswich actually, Osborne actually marked Cruyff out of the game. Ipswich won out 3-0 against Barcelona at Portman Road. And I watched that a midweek game.
What a player to see that.
But I also saw George Best at Ipswich as well. So I don't remember. I watched him. I know I watched the game. I was at the game. It was one of my first games when Man United. But I don't remember that. But I remember the Barcelona game and Cruyff.
Yeah, there you go. So let's talk about the Sporting 87 dressing room now. Let's get some dirt on what's going on at the moment. So, best dresser.
Oh, my word. I'll say James Cadby. He'll get answered. He'll get answered a lot of them. But yeah, James Cadby. No, Will Frost. The smartest dresser actually is Will Frost. Has got to be. Will Frost is a very, very smart dresser.
Yeah. Worst dresser.
Worst dresser. Elliot.
I was going to say, please, Ash. Please.
I'll go with Elliot.
Who sorts the music out in the changing room?
Oh well, we're very diplomatic at the club. So every week, a player will get a chance to sort it out, and if they don't, they get fined. So it changes every week. So 1 week, one person has it, so everybody gets a chance over the course of a season to do it at least once or twice. But if they don't do the music, they get fined. So
that is a brilliant idea.
That way, you get a bit of a mix.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think everyone that we've asked, Adam, has always had like one or maybe two people that sort it out every week, haven't we? So
I know Stowe have got like DJ Bully down there. Tom Bullard, yeah, he's on the decks.
Best dancer.
I haven't seen any of them dance, but I reckon who would I don't know. I reckon Dan Steed would fancy himself as that.
Yeah, I could probably agree with that. I could probably agree with that. You may or may not be able to answer this question. Who can't handle their drink?
Who can't handle their drink? Elliot struggled on a few occasions. I know that. Of course, several of them I've seen. Sometimes the worse for wear, but we'll go with Elliot.
Fair enough. Best trainer.
Best trainer. Well, I've got a young lad called Josh Thomas, who's come up through the youth system, and he is the fittest lad. So quite often he will, so we split training up on a Wednesday night because we've got so many different teams, and he trains. He trains first with the under-18s, and then comes and trains with us, the first team.
Wow.
And he's still the fittest lad amongst them as well.
There you go. Worst trainer.
Worst trainer.
Time to dig somebody out.
Yeah, I was just trying to think who I could dig out. When Floyd's around, he's always late. But then Floyd's always late to everything apart from crosses. But yeah, Floyd is always late. But he actually, in fairness, he will work quite hard.
Yeah.
Elliot's not often at training this year, so he needs to shape up a bit. And I told him that the other week. Luke Taylor will think he's the best at trainer, but he thinks he's the best player. So that let's say Luke Taylor's the worst.
We'll go with that one. We'll finish on that one because one of the other questions that we always ask, I think somebody has asked that as a Twitter question, so I'll save that towards the end.
All right.
Of the podcast. Interesting answers in there. The one about the music in particular, I really like that. It's a smart idea. Might take that for future years if I ever get involved in a game. You never know.
Yeah, well, it's part of what we decided at the team meeting we had at the beginning of the year, and that's one of the fines as well. So it just gives everybody a chance to put their music together. So
there you go. Adam, thoughts on that?
I'm very much with you. I love that music idea, like getting everyone's input in the change rooms. Stops the same old tunes getting churned around week in, week out as well.
Yeah, definitely. So let's move on then to the current state of football in the UK. Utter chaos, really, up and down the Football League. Whether or not
Getting worse every week, isn't it, James?
I know the decisions that are coming out at the moment. The Premier League seem adamant that they want to start the season again. EFL are kind of thinking about starting the season. The National League's been suspended, and
Brighton players have been diagnosed with the illness today, changing the shape of things. But for me, I think it changes the shape of things quite seriously.
Well, I was just going to say, because there's been a couple of cases where obviously I know Germany have reopened or loosened some of their restrictions, but then 3 players from a team, and I can't remember the team, have all tested.
Yeah, my father-in-law told me about this today.
So
it really changes things.
It really does. It really, really does. I want to get your thoughts, John, on what is overall football-wise. We'll move on to the SIL in a bit, but just looking at what's going on across the football pyramid, how do you kind of assess what is happening at the moment? What's your take on it all?
Well, it's obviously all to do with money, but I just can't see how football can get back to anything resembling what we know, really, because, I mean, just talk about what you're talking about now in terms of if a team's got 3 or 4 players, it doesn't matter what number you come up with, that have got COVID, how many players in a squad do you have to have COVID before you can cancel the game? I mean, and then even if you say it's 4 and you've got 3 players or 2 players, are the rest of the opposition going to be happy playing, knowing that you've been training with those players over the last week or been staying with those players over the last few days?
Yeah.
And you know, the whole thing. And then if you start cancelling games, I mean, the schedule was going to be tight anyway. Well, if all of a sudden you haven't got, these games called off, do those games then get rescheduled later? The whole thing becomes farcical, really.
Well, we've spoken about the schedule, John, before, and I think you touch on quite a good point there, because we believe that it may take up to 3 games a week in places to get it through, which is a huge fitness test and possibly a concern as well. Like, it maybe won't offer a level playing field for those with a smaller squad. As soon as you chuck in a missed game and whatever punishment may come with that, then the whole thing just gets into disarray, considering the fact that we're still saying the whole season has to be finished by a set date.
I am also not convinced that the quality of the games is going to be anything like that resembles what a normal football match we see in the Premier League, because these players haven't been training. It's going to be like a testimonial game, and the intensity is just not going to be there. And I still think there's a massive problems with players' contracts in terms of those that haven't got contracts, or their contracts are running out. Are they really going to be motivated to play? Are they really going to... The whole thing becomes...
But those that are playing bang mid-table with nothing to win or nothing to lose from the whole thing of it, I mean, really, you have to ask the question, what's the point of them even turning up?
Yeah.
And will that come into the fact that will some of them not want to turn up, and will the players revolt to some degree?
Yeah, I think
you've got to look at it. They are human. They are going to have concerns about stepping foot not only on a football pitch but back into training, because for all you know, you've been following the rules correctly, but that your teammate may not well have been. I mean, there's been a lot of cases where we've seen people who are breaking the rules, who have been caught. They could well have been telling their teammates and their club, yeah, I've been sticking to it.
Yeah, and also there'll be players that have got family members that they're living with that are vulnerable. So will they want to be, or will they have to go and live away from home? Like the NHS staff, will they have to sort of isolate themselves from their families? Maybe. Do you know what I mean? The whole thing is.
Well, the problem is in the professional game, like, again, you stumble across an argument where there's so much money in it where they could probably afford to do that. They could probably afford to stick them in a camp and just say, well, these people aren't going to see anyone other than themselves for the remaining 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Get it done for the sake of the money side of the game. And the hit to them would be quite large because there isn't going to be income from other revenues and stuff. But for the sake of getting the season done and making sure that there's no take back off the financial side of things in terms of TV money and stuff, that's quite a big thing. And I do wonder if that's why we're seeing the push from pro teams to get things done over the fact that there was none of this financial stuff to worry about in the non-league lower tiers. So they knew that there would be no comeback from any other organisations, so they could just write it off quickly.
Yeah, totally. It is obviously all driven by money and revenue and the broadcasters and everybody.
Yeah, I mean, do you think then that the Brighton, because I've just been looking on it now, it is the Brighton players have now said that 3 of their players have been tested for it. Do we think that that's going to have any sort of bearing on any sort of decision now that, because at the moment Arteta was found to have the virus, the league completely shut down, didn't it? It had been humming and hawing, but until someone had actually got it, nothing was being done. So do we think maybe that now that this has come out,
it's life in general, that though, James, isn't it? It takes one person. You always have to sacrifice one person as such before they'll actually take action. Ideally, you wouldn't have wanted anyone to get it because then it's obvious the spread would be exponential. But they had to wait to get a confirmed case before saying, "Oh no, we can't risk this."
But they're not going to. I mean, the only thing is they're not going to start for another 3 weeks, are they? I mean, it's going to be 3. What's I don't know what the earliest date they're saying they're going to start. I mean, but it's going to be.
We did get some details, and it was the fact that they'd be back in training. The initial plan would be back in training next Monday, but that's clearly not going to happen after the speech that happened tonight.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's Boris is. I mean, I tried to sit there and listen to what Boris was saying, but it was just a jumbled nonsense in my opinion. But from what I can gather, he's saying that you are allowed to exercise, but it's only within people within your household. So
your household groups, yeah. So
that you can't then turn around to the rest of the UK and say these are the rules for you, but football's exempt from those rules.
Football is more important.
I did get a text from one of my players asking if he'd mentioned the SIL, but he hadn't.
There's already been so many saying that the manager's now going to adopt 22 of the lads to be able to form a first team training group.
Exactly. I think one of the things that came out from this as well, I don't know if any of you have seen the statement from Watford's chairman. He came out a couple of days ago saying that they're talking about obviously the fact that these are going to have to be done on neutral venues that the Premier League can control. And they're saying you're not going to be allowed to have the games at your home pitch. And the Watford chairman came out and said that, he gave the example of them beating Liverpool and said that was done because we played at our ground and it was to our advantage. And the moment you start putting those in neutral venues, the integrity of the league really just completely goes away. I mean, whether or not fans are not going to be there, let's face it, they can't be there. But the integrity of the league is just completely gone. The moment you say, right, well, Watford versus, let's say, Leicester is going to be played at Wembley. Do you know what I mean? It's going to make absolutely zero sense, isn't it?
It makes me wonder though, because they've also spoken about different kickoff times. If they'll literally if they'll have a mass training camp thing that can be well controlled, and then they'll just use 2 or 3 venues, and that will be it. And
that then surely causes more of an issue, because the more people you've got continuously going through one place like a conveyor belt.
not if they don't let them away from it. If it's all self-contained and that they don't have other contact,
Yeah,
it's actually maybe the safest way that they possibly could do it.
I don't know. When you start getting into those realms, and then there's like changes of the number of substitutes that are allowed has been suggested, and then shortening of minutes per half, I just think, where is it going to end before you go, actually, do you know what? Let's just wait.
Yeah.
I mean, from your perspective, John, what do you agree with the decision, particularly in the non-league, to completely cancel the season, or do you think maybe they should have, from a national league perspective, to wait like the EFL was maybe doing?
I don't think they had any option but to cancel the whole season, really, because people just needed some clarity as to where, what to do. And there's no guarantee now, even now, that we're going to be able to start the non-league season at the beginning of the season now. So so where they would have crammed the previous season in, it's just not possible. And also, it's not necessarily contracts, although obviously higher up the non-league pyramid, this would have affected. Teams are losing players, aren't they? Because as from June, the 1st of June, players are not contracted to that club anymore. So then you've got all sorts of issues like that.
Oh, we're sitting having the audio of it where Colchester were the first club to announce players being released. And it looks like that has continued. I've seen a number of National League teams have said that they're going to not be renewing certain people's contracts. You then have to then get, how can you maintain the level, the sort of status quo of what you've had during the season when players are being let go? I mean, I'm one of those people that I think they should wait and try and resume and finish the season when possible, because we, as you quite rightly said, we don't know when we're going to be able to start the next season. So why are we focused so much on fixing next season when we could still potentially, when things do get back up and running, finish this season and then just start from wherever we're at? But it gets very tricky to try and do that once players' contracts get cancelled, doesn't it?
Yes, and squads have changed, and then can you sign new players and all of those sort of issues, and it makes it all very complicated.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that moves kind of nicely from that to an SIL perspective. We've, I've seen the statement that has come from the SIL to say that the season has been null and void because of the fact that the senior division, that decision was taken out of their hands. So Division 1, 2, 3, etc. have all had to follow suit. Again, do you agree with that decision?
I think it's difficult. I don't think they had a lot of option, if I'm honest. I think they've done what they had to do. There's no easy solution, and there's no winners in this, as far as I can see. I mean, it's now about how do you move forward, and everybody will have their own self-interest reasons and theories onto how we should move forward.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, kind of where do you stand in it?
I think, as time goes on, it's becoming ever more evident that there was no other option. But when we first start discussing this, how exponential the problem would become maybe wasn't as obvious. It was clear that it was a big issue. It's just, like John said, there are no winners either way, and it's just such a shame that things have been written off. I'm hearing every single day, I'm hearing new methods of being able to calculate things. And if they are really going to force a calculation method through to try and find promotion and relegation, or because football being a pyramid, that could have filtered all the way down, and then that's where you're going to have that big argument of there should have just been time to wait and hold back and maybe universally use one method. But maybe the thing is they could have made that they could have done the announcement in 2 parts rather than do it 2 days apart, by saying, the season will not be played anymore. It will not happen.
I could use this forum to give you another theory.
Yeah, go on.
Well, I think if last year's results have all been expunged, that means we revert back to the season that was completed, don't we? So those teams that then are in those positions for promotion the previous year, if there are spaces available, then become available, don't they?
Yeah.
Promotion. So obviously that would affect our league, and Sporting being in 3rd place in the league at that time when the league was last finished would have the extra place for promotion. I mean, it seems a fair result to me.
So that's the thing. I think there are teams that have done well over several seasons and not quite got there, and they've missed out as well. And it just seems like another year of pain, really. Meanwhile, there's other teams that float around relegation spaces every year, and like they've been handed a get out of jail free card, really, and they'll be pleased because it means that, well, they'll be pleased in the main, dependent on finances, because it means they can carry on, doing what they're doing at a higher level. It's difficult to know.
Yeah, you have to feel sorry for clubs like Stowmarket, who have obviously, invested hard in getting up this year, and clubs that have got to semi-finals of cups and all those sort of things. It's just going to be taken away from them, which is gutting, really.
Yeah, the cup one is really interesting, actually, because in the Furlough None League Challenge Cup, Stowmarket were against Hackney Wick, who were a step 6 side. They haven't been formed that long. Clearly the furthest they'd ever got in the competition. That was a real chance for them. That was just, it was the week before that game that lockdown got announced, and they'd already billed it as the biggest game in their history and stuff. And it's just all those opportunities that are taken away from clubs, which are really, looking at a broader spectrum of football, it really does affect people.
I mean, moving back to the SIL part of it, the statement that was sent around to clubs, which I've had sent on to me, not going to say who by, but I had it sent over to me, where they were talking about the meeting is still scheduled to talk about next season and what potentially happens with that, and they're talking about relegations and promotions. How do you think that can be sorted? Because obviously from your perspective, let's talk about Sporting for a second. You're 4th in the table, but yet you're a number of games behind a lot of the teams above you. And from what I could see, I think you still had, maybe Halesworth or Ransoms. I can't remember.
We still had to play Ransoms.
Yeah, so there was still
and Ransoms and Halesworth still had to play each other. So one of the teams would have dropped points.
Yeah. So it was still very much in your hands. So how do you think it should be settled from an SIL perspective? Let's move away from the rest of the football world, because that meeting is still going to be happening. From what I've seen, they're still scheduling to do that meeting, whether or not that is in face to face or whether or not that's done via any other means. But what do you think would be an ideal solution, or have you not really given it much thought, or is it more of a club decision where that gets put forward to the league?
So I think what they're going to do is they're going to basically go with the teams that are in the top positions, and they're going to offer them promotion. I don't think they're going to give anybody. I don't think they're going to force anybody to be relegated. I think they're just going to promote teams.
Really?
Yeah, and if some teams ask to be relegated because they're in those positions and they want to regroup, I think that will be allowed. But they're not going to force anybody to be relegated. That's the way I think they're going to go forward.
Okay, so from a sporting perspective, where do you kind of stand on that? Because as I said,
we'd stay in Division 1 that way. But as I said to you earlier, I mean, for me, the most sensible thing is to forget last year's season and go back to the 2018-19 season. and if there are places to be available for promotion, you see who the highest team was in that season.
Well, I mean,
take a 2-year average.
Yeah.
Well,
I think, in fairness, I think the SIO, the management team have got a difficult job, and I'm sure they'll. I think whatever they do, there will be people who will criticise them, which I think is unfair, if I'm really honest, because they run the league, and I genuinely think they run the league well, and so they will do it with the best interest of what they think, and I genuinely don't think the people there have got any vested interest in any one club. So I think, I think they will do the job of which they think will be good for the SIL.
Yeah, but I keep sorry to keep kind of going on to this particular point, but from a club perspective, as I said, you've got games in hand. You've still got the season still whirling within your hands. Are you gonna? Is there any part there where you think actually we can potentially contest that, or at least put our case forward to say, well, the season.
I have put the case forward. I have spoken to people on the management team, and I would love to go into the senior league. There is no question about that, James. The other thing is, I want to go in the senior league, and if we were offered a place, we would definitely take it. We would definitely take it. But even getting into the senior league that way, you lose that moment of achievement, don't you? Because but obviously we would take it definitely.
Okay. Because I'm just looking through the other kind of divisions as well. If you look at Division 2, we've got Tattingstone, who are 10 points clear at the moment, but the team in second place, Bedwicks, have got 6 games in hand. Branford Road Old Boys in third have got 4 games in hand. They're only 11 points behind. AFC Your Shirts are 4 games behind Tattingstone, and they're on 32 points. They're only 15 points behind us. I think maybe points per game might be an answer in the SIL, because it's just because of the fact that some teams have played far more games than the other. I don't really know how this can be fairly settled by just going, first and second go up. You know what I mean?
Things change, James, down the pyramid, though, that you've got to remember. Things like the ability to get games on, the fact that Tuesday night games don't really exist when things have to be called off. There is going to be that bigger dynamic between who has played how many games, simply due to the luck of the draw when it comes to getting things on. So points per game might be literally the only viable solution if you want a fair one. But if you take people in their current standings, there is no way on earth that would be fair until you get till very, very near the end of the season.
And also the other challenge you've got is teams haven't, we, for example, we haven't played Mendlesham once this season yet, who are bottom.
Yeah.
Well, now I don't mean that to be disrespectful to Mendlesham, because quite often we struggle against Mendlesham anyway. But in a sense,
you've had a laugh.
In a sense, Ransoms and Palesworth have both probably played them twice, so they've got 6 points that, in a theory were according to the season this season were sort of easier points to get, and so that's a difficult one as well, isn't it?
I think we can use points per game, but if they're going to decide anything beyond that, which would be something like goal difference, you've got to say goal difference is a nonsense.
Yes, because of that very reason.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Throughout the statement, there hasn't really been. It just says that the top 2 teams in each division who were at the top of the standards before all results were expunged will be invited to play in the division. But I think that's. I don't see how you can do that. I really, really don't see how you can do that. I'll be very interested to hear what comes out of that particular meeting, if it does still go ahead, because, if they are saying that the top 2 teams, I think that is potentially going to cause a lot of aggro.
It could be complex, but the way you could do it is you could wind everyone's results back to the point where they've all played as many games as the team that's played the fewest, and then see what the league table looked like on that day.
Could do.
I have to work out and see where that leaves us before I agree with it.
Well, it'd be quite complicated, but it'd be an interesting table to look at.
Well, you do that for me and email it to me, and I'll let you know.
Sorry, my data analysis sheets they've all gone down.
Well, I mean, I'd love to hear the thoughts from people who are within the SIL on this matter. What, how would you settle things? Let us know down in the comment section, or let us know on Twitter how you think is the fairest way to be able to do this. Because, from the statement, if it is the top two, I can't see how that can actually work. But it'll be very interesting to hear what other clubs' perspectives and thoughts on that are. What is the fairest way to decide it? As I said, let us know. Sort of like down in the comment section. Really, it'll be interesting to hear.
If you think that voiding it the same as the leagues that go directly above it I want to hear that as well. Like, do you think that whole decision should have filtered down and they shouldn't have been given free rein at that level as well?
Yeah, very, very good point, actually. Because, if it is void, then, you just start again, don't you? Do you know what I mean? So there's going to be a lot of clubs that will be annoyed at that. They've put a lot of effort and a lot of resources into setting that up. I mean, I know, again, particularly teams in Division 2 and Division 3 who are miles clear, who will feel very aggrieved. Of that decision. But let us know. So down in the comment section, be really interested to hear that.
Are you outside Big Ben, John?
Yeah, I'm socially distancing.
So let us move on to your time in football, John. I'm really kind of keen, before we get into the Twitter questions, to kind of find out your history within football, where it kind of all started from, and how you've kind of got to this point of where you are and how long you've been with sports and etc. So let's go sort of right back to the beginning. What kind of level did you play at throughout your career, or have you never really played?
I didn't play at a great level. No, I'm not going to claim that. I got into coaching when I was working at West Suffolk College. So West Suffolk College needed a manager for their school, for their college team. And I knew one or two of the boys. There were some good players like Tom Crawford, Steve Callanan, Trevor David from Haverhill, and so they asked me. Well, I was working at the college, so I started putting some training sessions on, and then we formed a team and we started doing quite well, actually. Right. We did well enough for several of the boys to get selected for the county team. Nice. And so I because I was keen at the time, I took the minibus and took them all the way around and followed them. I sort of transported them for their games and got them there and got them home and all those sort of things. And after doing that for a couple of years, somebody from the county said that they were looking for an assistant manager at the county side. Would I consider it? Because they were needing someone to help. And there was a guy. So I said, yeah, well, I haven't got my coaching badges. And they said, well, we'll fund them if you're prepared to give the time. So one summer I went and did my coaching badges, or started my coaching qualifications.
Just a quick, how old were you when you first started your coaching badges?
Sorry, I didn't hear that question. Sorry.
How old were you when you first started your coaching badges?
I was about 25, 23, 24.
Okay.
23, 24.
Right. Yeah. It seems, Adam, we had Paul Granger on. It seems a very similar beginning to what he had, doesn't it?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, it's a story that rings true to one we've heard before, and there's a bit of passion for coaching from a young age, just getting involved and getting it done.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I used to go to a Monday night coaching. There used to be a Suffolk Coaches Association run by Terry Wesley, who's now, I think, I was speaking to Mel Aldous the other day. I think Terry's now at Tottenham. I think he was at Birmingham. He's been all over. But he ran the Suffolk Coaches Association with Ron Abbott, and Bobby Robson was the president, and they used to have sessions down at Portman Road on the training pitch next to the main pitch, and they used to have guest coaches come in and do sessions, and it was really, really good. I learned loads. But then I went on with the county, and there was a guy called Paul Wilkinson who was absolutely brilliant. He taught me so much. He's obviously he became a headmaster or deputy head up in Lowestoft, but he was a really good football coach, very structured. But then I was fortunate that I was part of the setup of Bury Football School, and we formed a football academy at West Suffolk College, which I'm a part of, and we employed Danny Laws, and he became a long-term friend, and he really, really inspired me, and he is an outstanding coach, and I've learned so much from him.
Yeah. And then where did that kind of then lead on to? What was the next step?
So I ran the county side for about 10 years. And I was working also full time for Bury Academy. And what happened was with the county side, we used to play a game against the sponsors at the time was NatWest Bank. And we had a game against the NatWest staff team from across the region. And in the bar afterwards, there was a guy called Graham Thomas, who was a long-term friend of mine, who was involved. He was the chairman at Sporting 87. And he said to me, do you fancy coming over and helping us with the club? And I said that I was thinking about going to a club, and he said, well, have a chat. And I met up with him, and I started coaching that following year. So that was 25 years ago. So I've been coaching. I've coached the first team at Sporting for 25 years. I've just done 20. This is my 25th year. I've just completed.
Incredible. So what made you kind of decide that you wanted to move into kind of a club mentality rather than the whole kind of academy club, a Bury setup? What made you?
Well, I actually did both at the same time, believe it or not. I've got a very accommodating wife. She's amazing. So I was working full time at the academy for a number of years. I also ran the county side, and I ran Sporting. And I coached the Sporting team. But at that time, Sporting were they were in the Bury District League. It was they just had two teams, and they didn't even have a youth team or anything like that. So it was just an adult team. And then about 16 years ago, through various things, I realised that I couldn't continue at the pace we were going at, really. And I got offered a job with another club, and I was going to take it with a professional club. But for various reasons, I chose not to go there. And I sort of had a moment where I sort of sat down and thought, what am I going to do if I'm not going to take that job? What do I want to achieve? What do I want to do? Where am I going to go? They asked me what I'd like to do, and I said I'd like to I'd always been disappointed that in Bury St Edmunds, apart from Bury Town, there was no real club that had what I called a structure or somewhere for youngsters and kids to go to. So one of my frustrations was teams in Bury, there were no teams with youth teams and then went into adult teams. There were no teams with decent facilities. and yet if you went to Ipswich, you had teams, and the big club that I admired the most was Ransoms. 20 years ago, Ransoms had a really good senior football club. They had brilliant facilities. They had a really good youth setup, and I wanted to make Sporting the sort of Ransoms of Bury St Edmunds.
Right.
And that's what I sort of started doing, really, and set the aim of doing. But if you lived in Ipswich at that time, you had so many choices. You had Ransoms, you had Woodbridge. There were other Ipswich youth sections like Copplestonians, like IVR. Obviously, Woodbridge were then became IVR. Over in Felixstowe, you had Trimley Red Devils, had a really good youth setup. There were other teams that had youth setups. There was nothing in this side of the county, and I thought it was lacking. So, yeah.
So when you come to setting those things up and getting into place a structure like that, how do you even begin to do that when, as you said, when you first joined, all you had was 2 teams? Like what kind of things are involved, back then? How you managed to build it over those years?
Having answered your questions earlier about, what films you watched or what, I do watch a lot of sort of documentaries, and I'm watching the series, the Michael Jordan, The Last Dance. Have you seen that series?
I haven't watched it. No.
It's really, really good. But one of I like those sort of programs. One of the quotes on there, they talk about the Bulls. They talk that the structure of what made that organisation, was it Johnson or was it the structure? And in order for a club to be successful, you need decent. You can't just have players or just a manager. You need a whole club structure to be successful, certainly long term. And so, a lot of work has been done getting a good structure and getting good people on board. And people see me as a figurehead for Sporting 87, but that really hides and masks a massive army of some really top-notch people.
It's interesting. Listen to it, isn't it, Adam? From just the first team, it's a whole collective. It's fascinating.
There's always a lot more to football, I think, than what everyone believes meets the eye, and like you say, it's the big collective that's important.
Yeah, so I mean, we've now got over 40 teams. We've got over 700 youngsters playing for the club.
That's mad. So those numbers in itself are just mad.
So the size of the club is just, we've got a youth team in the Thurlow Nunn on a Thursday. The under-18 league. We've got, on top of that, we've got walking football. We've got futsal teams. So it's just a totally different structure.
I think though, John, like it's all right saying that clubs have got certain numbers of teams and stuff. Like, to get an idea of how centric really to the community different clubs are is when you start putting numbers on the amount of players that are involved.
Yeah.
The bigger number behind that is the 700 people that are all centred around Sporting.
Yeah.
And that's obviously grown over many years, to what it is now, and like walking football is becoming quite a big thing, and stuff like that. So to integrate all of those things, the
incredible numbers. Those 700 numbers are just the ones that we got signed on with teams that are players that are signed on with the FA in youth teams and adult teams, and we've got more than that on top of that. We've got a lot of social football that's not even in those numbers. So you're probably talking about 1,000 people every week, playing football, which is brilliant, isn't
it? Do you think, James, that people realise that that's the sort of size of a community that a football club brings together?
Well, no, you think about, the first team, don't you? If you ever look at a club, you think about the first team, you think maybe about the reserves, and and then kind of like an under-18s maybe. But then beyond that, you don't really get to hear the ins and outs, especially from a non-league perspective, about how many levels there are. You don't often get that advertised, do you?
No.
Let's face it. So to hear those numbers is just staggering.
I think it's quite easy though to turn up, watch a game of football, and just think about the 25 people that have sort of rolled out for the warm-up, to be honest, and forget about the operation that goes behind it.
I mean, how important from your perspective, John, is the whole setup to Sporting as a collective? Do you rely on the people that are in there now to kind of, if we think about the first team as the ultimate goal, how crucial is the setups that you have right from an early age to up to the first team for you as a club?
Totally. So when I first started, you spent all your time trying to chase for players, trying to get players on board. But when you've got a youth system, you've always got players coming through. You've always got, and you only need 3 or 4, 2 or 3 each year to come into the adult teams. But if you don't have that supply, it just kills you. You just can't keep going. And what you're relying on is someone to have contacts or some money to pay people to come along. But if you've always got people coming to the club through various channels, you've got the ability to create a club, create a structure, and a community that people actually want to be part of and actually enjoy and go forward, really.
So do you think that's why Sporting have always been a consistent throughout the SIL, whereas you see a lot of clubs have like 2 or 3 good years and then drop, or have their difficult times and then bounce back, etc. Do you think that's why Sporting over the last few years have always have always been at a level because of the fact that that system's in place?
Well, the consistency, and I've always got youngsters coming into the squad. I mean, I've got about 23 players that I consider to be first team players, squad players. Well, over half of them have played over 100 games for the first team alone, let alone any of the other youth teams or reserves or third team. I mean, one player has played nearly 400. At the beginning of this season that's just gone, he played 377 games for the club, plus what he played this year.
Wow!
And I've got several players that have got over 250 appearances.
Yeah.
Well, that's a long time to be around. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. There must be something about the club that is keeping those players there as well, because it's one thing to bring people through a youth setup, but then for people to stick around. What do you think it is about the club that makes people stay?
I was about to ask that. What do you think makes people loyal to Sporting?
Well, I hope it's because, I mean, my coaching philosophy is that people should enjoy the time they are with the club, and you can't force players to be part of the club. They've got to want to be there, and it's pointless having people there that don't want to be there. So you've got to create a bunch of mates that really do enjoy their company, do want to go forward and do buy into the values and whatever you're trying to achieve at that football club, and that's what I've tried to do. Yeah. And I've been fortunate. We've had a lot of people that have wanted to do that. It's taken a lot of hard work, but also a lot of people that support that effort in doing that.
Yeah. One question I have to ask from a youth perspective, obviously with Bury Town just down the road and the kind of things that they're trying to implement at the moment. Obviously, I know they've got players, former players like Alan Lee on board now, and they're heavily connected now with Ipswich Town. Do you kind of, from a competition perspective and trying to maintain the number of players you've got coming through the youth setup, how are you finding things over recent times as well, with a lot of academies and all that kind of stuff popping up all over the place? Has that been something tricky to kind of keep a hold of those players, or how have you found that recently?
I'm not worried about that at all, because at youth level, we don't have a policy of just going out and recruiting all the best players. In fact, that's just the opposite to what we do. People come along and they sign up and we stick with them. And if better players become available and want to join, if there are places, we let them. If not, they'll have to wait like the other people in the queue. And so if players want to go along to what are perceived to be the bigger, better clubs, they can go along, and then I'll see them when they're under 18s or when they realise what sporting's about. Do you know what I mean? I've got players in the first team who have come up through our youth system. I've also got players that are in the first team that have been at academies and other systems. And if you talk to them, they'll say they're enjoying their football now more than they've ever enjoyed it, and they wouldn't go back even though they've had offers. So,
Incredible stuff, really. So, Adam, anything you want to kind of add?
I think I've touched some interesting points there, and like loyalty is a nice one to touch on, because how many times do we talk about and hear about as soon as money gets involved, people move clubs for a fiver, and to speak to somebody where loyalty and community in their club is so important, but not only important, is prevalent as well, which is evidenced by the number of appearances that we're talking about, and the size of those squads, and the fact that you can pull people through from the junior teams into the first team, and even if it is only a couple of years just to keep that going, it's being done and it's working. It's a real success story, really.
If you attract the type of player that will come to you because you're giving them an extra tenner, eventually he will go because someone else will give him a tenner more.
Very true.
If someone's coming to Sporting wanting a tenner, we're not the right club for them. And I genuinely say this to all the first teamers that join the first team squad. So at the end of every season, I've just finished. I've got 2 more meetings to do this week. I meet with all the first team players. This year I've done it over Zoom, and we just sit down and we talk about their season and we put targets in place for next year. Equally, new players that are coming into the squad for next year, I meet up with them, and whether they be players that are in the reserves hoping to promote up to the first team, or whether they're under 18 players that are playing for the Furlough None team and hoping to get into it, or they're new players from outside, I'll sit down with them. And occasionally I'll meet with a player who I think is a good player, but I know for whatever reason he won't fit into the culture of what we're trying to achieve, and I'll wish him well and say, try this other club. But most people, well, I can't think of anybody who's come into our club and not loved it and enjoyed it. And I always, when I have a new player, I always sit down with them and say, look, this is what we're about. This is what we're trying to achieve. I'll meet you in a month's time and see if you still want to continue with the club. And, they do.
Yeah. Have you, during your time at Sporting, have you had, you may or may not want to answer this, have you had any offers to kind of move away? Have you had people kind of seeing the success that you've had and wanting you to bring it over to somewhere else? Or have you, has that never really materialised in your time in the manager?
Yes, I've people have spoken to me about going all sorts of places, and even recently, people have talked to me about that. But it depends on what you want to achieve and what your aims and but you can't talk about loyalty and on one hand and then jump ship the next, can you?
Yes.
And managers moan that players are not loyal. Well, you've got to be loyal to your players by keep playing them and not treat them unfairly. And equally, you've got to look at what messages you're putting out there. So.
Yeah, definitely. And then one final question for myself. From a coaching badges perspective, how far are you kind of along that? Obviously, I know the badges situation has changed over the years. We have Paul Granger on, who said that the badges that he done were, have been long out of date now, when he hasn't kind of renewed anything. What kind of level are you at as a coach?
So I passed my UEFA B about 15 years ago, and every 3 years since then, I've updated it every 3 years to keep me UEFA B.
Right.
5 years ago, I went away and completed the first year of the A license.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy that experience, if I'm honest.
Right.
I was there to learn and to really meet people and challenge myself. But at the time, I don't think they were that interested in helping people like me. They were only interested in pros. And the tutor on the actual course actually said that unless you want to coach in the Premiership, you shouldn't be on this course. Well,
Really?
when you've paid £3,000 for the course, I thought that was a bit rich, if I'm honest. But
right. Wow.
But yeah, I did the first year. I learned loads. I regret not finishing it.
Right.
Whether I passed is another matter. That's not. But I enjoy the learning process. So I've found other ways to challenge myself and keep myself updated in terms of developing my coaching. So I often watch all sorts of coaching videos, and I go along to various coaches' meetings. I get invited to coaches' meetings. I've got a number of friends within the pro game and the semi-pro, and so I go along to various things and try and keep myself up to date.
There's just so much available online now as well in terms of coaching resources, isn't there?
There's more available. So when I started, literally, I used to, as I said, I used to go to the Suffolk Coaches Association run by Ron Abbott and Perry Wesley, and they were brilliant. But that was considered rare, and you'd go for a long period of time before you got anything else. Do you know what I mean? And there was just nothing around. But the FA, the material the FA do for the coaching courses is absolutely superb, especially up to UEFA B. Above that, I think it's far too expensive and far too geared at the pro game. But the beginning levels of the coaching qualifications are reasonably priced and are really, really good. And the material you get is absolutely top drawer, and it's thought out. It's produced by professional academic people who understand how people learn, how youngsters learn, how you develop, and then it's got really top-notch football coaching people associated with it, and it's brilliant stuff, genuinely.
There you go. Let's do some Twitter questions, because I want to get through as many of these as we possibly can, because there's so many things that we kind of haven't touched on that I've been holding off because I wanted to get these questions in. That, as I said, they're the kind of things I wanted to ask as well. So let's start off with, we had one on the last video that we put out, the Dean Bowditch podcast. Floyd Kroll, I believe you know Floyd, don't you?
Yeah, Floyd plays for about 300 games for me. I know Floyd well.
There you go. He said, how do I control my inner chimp? I promise he will understand this.
So one of the things I do. We have coaches meetings at Sporting so many times a year, and one of the things I always do is a book review. And I always review 3 or 4 books that I've read over I do read a lot of books,
right?
Management books over the course of the year, and so I always review a couple of new ones. But there's always a few of my favourites that I pull out. So Chimp Paradox is one of my favourite coaching books. And over the years, so I was fortunate, going back to what I was saying about learning, when that was first launched, or about 10 years ago, the FA got Tom Peters in. And I went along, I think it was either St George's Park or Wembley. And I went to they had the author in and went through the book, and it was absolutely brilliant. And just in front of me, on the launch of the book, there was a guy called Stuart Pearce, and he put a question at the end, and he said, I don't know about a chimp. He said, I've had a massive Chewbacca on my back all my life. But it was a really good book, and I've used that a lot. And so a lot of these books I use in my coaching and training sessions, and so the boys take the mick out of it, and so Floyd.
Right.
I've got a question from another one of your players that's come in whilst I've been talking to you. Matthew Brown has asked me, why did you insist on playing him on the wing when he's got no skills, no pace, and no crossing ability whatsoever? I mean, that's quite an honest assessment of himself, I guess.
I've played with Matt throughout my childhood. I don't know if I agree with that. I think he had a bit about him, to be fair.
I think his age is starting to get to him.
Matt is one of those football characters that you will give 100%, and he will work hard, and he will get the most out of whatever talent he has. And so I think he's doing himself a little bit of disservice. But I remember one season he got a few goals when I played him up front with Sam Marsden, but maybe that was because
when he scores a goal, you don't hear the last of it.
Yeah.
He loves to tell you about it.
Yeah.
There you go. Let's. So we've got Paris Merrick ask him how he would feel if Ransom and Halesworth did go up, knowing that Sporting can potentially catch them. We've kind of talked about it briefly, but
I'd be gutted. I mean, and I do want to go up, and we were looking forward to the end of the season, and we hoped that we were going to close the gap and be in with a shout for that right at the end. I think that was possible. We will never know now. That's been taken away from us, unfortunately.
Yeah. I've got Luke Riley, who's obviously with Thurston. He says that he knows you from your time in the game. I think he's played for you for a few years. Is that right?
Yeah, he used to play for me. Yeah, I've known Luke for a long while. Yeah.
Yeah, he sent me a message because he said the question might be he didn't know how Twitter would react to it. He said that you'll understand it, but he said Sporting 87 with their great youth setup, structure off the pitch, facilities and players are rightly seen as one of the most successful clubs in the SIL, but particularly in recent years haven't won a league or a notable cup. Why does he think that is? And when does he think they have come closest / had the team to win something but didn't? So, yes, first start of it. Why do you think that the club has not won a league or a notable cup in its time? Is it just for whatever reason?
It'd be good enough. We should have won it 2 or 3 years ago when Bennell won it and Hoxton went up. We should have won it that year, but our friends at Mendlesham, we drew with Mendlesham at our place, and then we lost in the last minute over at Mendlesham, and that just allowed Hoxton in. But we didn't get over the line, so we weren't good enough, obviously.
Yeah. Now I would say the second part of it when he says. When do you think that they've come closest or had the team to win it? Would you say the team from a couple of years ago has been the closest?
Well, last year was pretty close as well. Obviously, 4 years ago, I think it was, had we have beaten Claydon on the last game of the season, we would have gone up. Or had Hoxton not have beaten Ben on the last game of the season, we would have gone up as well. But neither of those things happened. Then last year, obviously, it was us and Bilderston, and we hadn't got enough goals, so Bilderston went up on goal difference.
Yeah, you lost that by 4 goals, didn't you, in the end?
Indeed, yeah.
Unbelievable.
When you look back at seasons like that, do you always think we could have poked an extra one there, could have poked an extra one there, and this would have been different? Or are you someone that can forget it once it's gone and just accept that that's the way it's rolled?
You don't obviously know me, Adam. I definitely don't forget it. No, it's fine. You just move on.
Yeah. No. I mean, from that aspect, when you're losing out by 4 goals,
Yeah.
are you sitting there thinking, well, that's the game where we could have done this and it could have been different?
Oh,
How detailed is your mind running through that? I suppose is what I'm trying to ascertain.
I can tell you where we lost it on which moments.
Yeah.
And even this season, we had one poor result this year, and that's all. So you do have to look at it, and you have to look at yourself as a coach. Did you put the right teams out? Did you prepare the lads right? Did you get things right? Did you get things wrong? But you have to look at the things in detail and move on, and it gives you motivation, hopefully, to crack on and get going and do it again.
Yeah.
But you have to look at it. You have to look at it fairly. Try and take the emotion of it out and look at where you can improve. And the thing with the gutting thing with last year against Bilderston, I'd said to the lads, if you get to 17 wins, we will go up, because no team in the last 10 years have got 17 wins and not gone up. And we got the 17 wins, we just didn't get enough goals.
Drew Kendall has said, what inspired Jon to become a manager, and what is it like to be one? We talked about what inspired you. We know your kind of journey into it. Talked about that briefly. But what is it like to be a manager, especially nowadays? I think we see so many times, I suppose, in the news where certain people are getting fired from or being put on disciplinary because of the way that they are coaching certain players, and different rules in academies and stuff like that. You can speak to people in certain ways. What is it like being a manager, I suppose, today compared to when you first started?
I think you sort of develop your own style, you develop your own culture. I have to be honest and say I love it. I love Saturdays. I love training nights with the lads. And there is a responsibility in the sense that you're trying to create an environment where those people coming in to that team for that moment in time at our level, that should be the best time of their week. It should be the time when they enjoy their week. They've all had jobs, but as a coach, you have to learn. And part of why Sporting are slightly different, and why I guess I'm slightly different, is that I realise that players are coming into that section of the week with all sorts of other baggages, with all sorts of other issues going on, and somehow you've got to make them create an environment where they feel comfortable to perform, and if there's other things going on, you've got to try and support them really through their lives in order for them to
so it's more, there's a lot more off the pitch stuff, as well as what kind of goes on the pitch.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got Ben Moore, who says, any tips for a young coach like myself trying to get into the game? What would be your number one tip if you had to give one?
Definitely go on the coaching courses. I do think the FA courses are good, but don't believe and swallow everything they say hook, line and sinker. Right. Go and look at other coaching philosophies. So go and look at Porver coaching. Go and, if you can get abroad, go and have a look at how they coach abroad or in other environments. Look on the internet, look at games, look at other coaches. The the FA coaching syllabus is good, but it's not the only way to play football. It's not the only way to coach.
Yeah.
But adapt it, change it, and work with it.
It's interesting you mentioned about abroad, because we had Justin Wally on, didn't we? A couple of maybe it was a week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago. He's been over to, what was it, Latvia, Africa, Russia.
Football has taken him a lot of places in life.
One of his tips was to get out and explore the way the different countries manage and operate, because the English way is only one way, and it's not always the successful way, is it? Do you know what I mean?
I've been fortunate. So I've been to America quite a few times, and we've got a link with a coaching organisation in America. And we send coaches. Every year we send people over to the States. But I've been over there quite a few times. And that's interesting how they coach. It's different, totally different. Also, a few years ago, I was fortunate enough to be part of a coach education program in South Africa. So when the World Cup was happening, I went and did some coach education over in South Africa, preparing coaches to become level 1s and level 2s in townships right across. It was part of the government's drive to increase football participation in South Africa up until and after the World Cup. And I went and did some coach education over there, and it was absolute. I went 5-6 times, and it was fascinating, absolutely superb, loved it. But although I was obviously one of the tutors on the courses, I actually learned loads.
Wow, I've never been to America, so I'm going to be speaking to you after this phone call is after this call is done. That'd be interesting. I'd love to do that.
I was fortunate. So I was working. I first went to I'd got no interest in going to America, but 9/11 happened, and I was working at Berry Academy, and we got a phone call from Adidas saying that because all the big airlines had lost they couldn't get insurance to fly all of the university teams up to Seattle for this big Adidas festival, and they needed something to sort of spark this Adidas football festival up in Seattle. And so they said, we're phoning you because you're one of the better non-league academies. Could you and a coach come over and be part of this festival? And so me and Danny Laws went over. But originally, when they asked me, I said, "Oh, Danny, you can go with one of the other coaches from the academy." And I came home, and my wife said, "You're absolutely mad, John. A free trip to America.
Yeah,
you're letting somebody else go when you're the boss. If I was you, I'd go." I said, "Well, look, I'll go then." I went for 10 days, and after that, I went back several years, and I've been back several years since. I've loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I can imagine. I really would. So we've got Henley Athletic. Obviously, we know who runs the Henley Twitter page is Tony the Hat. He said, "Absolute legend of the SIL, one of the good guys. As a question, which SIL team does he most respect for the way they play the game? Who have you been impressed with in your time in the SIL?"
Well, originally I was impressed with Ransoms. As I said earlier, I wanted to make Sporting the Ransoms equivalent in Bury St Edmunds, as it were. I think now under Deeks, I taught Deeks at the academy, so I would say this, I guess, but I think Ben's him and Paul Allen have done a great job at Ransoms, and they play really good football. They really do play good football.
They have transformed that team around in the last couple of years, haven't they? They really have.
I mean, Ian Bistow at Cops always play decent football.
Yeah, good show.
Henley over the last few years have played some good football. We always play them pre-season, and they're always good games and competitive. And you have to also admire Cranes. we've played them a few times in cup competitions, and I've been and watched them. And Ian's done a really good job. I mean, they've got some good players, but they're good.
Yeah, really have. Maka asks, if you could swap Sporting for another SIL club, who would you go to and why? And then someone's put, he's not going to answer that.
Well, I genuinely, I've always liked, and this is not because Macca's asked it, but Macca probably knows. I've told Macca this, so he probably that's why he asked. I don't know. I'm good mate. Macca's a good lad, and he's done brilliant. I'm delighted that he's done well this year in the senior league.
Yeah.
But I like Old Newton. I mean, I like it some of it for historical reasons. In that years ago when I was first coaching, I used to get the green in. And I'd read these stories about Trevor Wardlaw's Old Newton, and he'd read all the stories in the Green and newspaper about Old Newton. And I always sort of thought, oh, I'd love to be involved like that. And then we started playing in pre-season, and then you meet some of the guys at Old Newton, and they've been there a long while. And when Crowley was there, and now Macca's been there. I've got on well with them, and we've always played pre-season games, and I think they've got a nice little setup. They've got a good setup at Old Newton, good structure. And they're very local to us. So
yeah. So he also asks, if you could choose 3 players to take from any SIL team, which ones would you take? Is there any players you've been majorly impressed with especially the last few years, anyway?
The trouble is, because I've been doing it for 20 odd years or 25 years, there's so many players. I mean, recent players. Well, I think Hilliard. I mean, he's not playing at the moment though. But the boy Hilliard up top. When he was at Achilles, I mean, he was superb. I mean, he was a player. I mean, now Tion Leggett, I think, is as Tion. I mean, the trouble is, you're not too careful. You start picking all the Crane players, because I think Roper's a good centre half. I also like the player at Clark Bruce has always impressed me.
Henley.
I think he's a really good player.
Yeah.
Also, Tijani at Henley as well. I've always thought he was good as well.
Yeah, Talon. Yeah.
I mean, but I don't know. Where do you? Yeah, they're some of the players I thought were good.
No, that's enough. Well, I think we've answered Macca's question there, which is good stuff. We've got Bill Case. He says TV show or box set recommendation for lockdown. Anything at the moment that's kind of tickling your fancy?
Well, I don't watch box set. Well, we already just get that. But watch The Last Dance, or watch. Actually, I watched The Test. The cricket behind the scenes of the Australian cricket. That was really good.
There you go, Bill. That's your question answered. Will Frost, obviously, you know Will. Favourite opposition manager he's come up against?
My favourite opposition manager I've come up against? Oh, my word.
Least favourite, I guess.
No, I'm not going to say that. I do like coming up against people that I respect, and people that, because when you beat them, it makes it even more satisfying. So we lost in the last minute, but I loved coming up against Ian, against Cranes in the cup when they beat us in the last minute from an own goal from one of my players. I like playing Henley. I like playing Cops in pre-season. They're always good games. I always like to come up against Macca at Old Newton.
There's a few for you to pick from, Will. The Suffolk Youth Football League, they have got in contact, said top SIL referees that you've seen. This could be a very interesting one.
Well, the best SAL referee, in my opinion, but then I'll say some others because otherwise you get accused of being local. But in my opinion, Brian Chapman is the best, one of the best.
Right.
Brian Chapman, he's just got class, and he just knows the game and knows how to manage the game properly without being stupid, and he's just a good referee. Again, locally, Darren Stobbard is really, really good, but again, he's a Bury ref, so people are going to say, "Oh, you've got all Bury refs." I'll tell you who people will laugh at this. This is not for bad. I'll tell you who was a very good referee, and obviously now he's more senior. And Ian Smiley was a really, really good ref. Really understood. I know he made a poor decision against us for the cup game. I actually think Paul Kitson's a good referee. I genuinely do. I think he's all right.
Yeah.
Who else? Years ago, years ago, I would go with Maurice Scrivener. Maurice used to be. I should have thought about that one. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, there's a lot of answers in there. To be honest, they'll be satisfied with that. Let's go on to. This is not a question, but we've had Bart from Bilderson get in contact. He just said, a great club man with a lot of passion for his team. He's done amazing things at Sport 87, and most importantly, an absolute gent and a guy that I call a football friend. So that's just a nice comment to pass on for you. It wasn't a question, but I thought it's important to get that in there. We've got Ransoms FC who have said, where do you see yourself individually, and where do you see the club in 5 years' time? That's a great question.
I hope that the club is in the senior league. I hope that it is. But I mean, in order for us to do that, we've got to deserve it, and we've actually, got to get there. So that's what I'd like to think. But whether we'll be good enough, time will tell. Whether I will be still here, I hope I will. But people might feel at the club that somebody else needs to take it on. I don't know, but I suspect I'll do something within the club, or if not, I'll go somewhere else, or I'll still be involved in football after. But I don't see myself moving from Sporting, but you never know.
I think most people would say it'd be a very silly decision if they decided to change, but I can't see that happening. We've got Jack Durry who's got in contact. He says, "Who's your favourite ever player to manage?" And he's also put onto it why and why is it James Cadbury? Well, answer the first part. Who's your favourite player to ever manage? Let's not go with the current squad because I don't want to upset anybody there. But who's been your favourite player that you've managed in your past?
Well, somebody who's not all times, or at Sporting, or all time.
Let's go with all time. Why not? Let's go for that.
Well, I'll pick one or two. One of my favourite players was a guy called Michael Stewart. He played for Bury Town for a bit. He came from Cambridge United. He was a really, really good player. Top. I'm amazed that he just lacked a little bit of pace, maybe. But he was a really, really good player. But he was a great lad as well. And I enjoyed working with him.
There you go. Brian Vella has said, John is probably the longest standing manager at the same club. What makes Sporting 87 so special, but not taking a different manager's role? So what is it particularly about the club? Is it because it's something that you've helped build, that you've stayed there for that long, or what makes it so special?
Yeah, I suppose that I've been able to have an influence, and I keep saying this and I mean it. It should, and I hope it doesn't just all evolve around me. There are lots of other people who are put a lot of work in and have a massive influence on the club and have a massive role. And I'm just fortunate that people see me as a figurehead, or because I'm first team manager and fairly active within the club, they see me and occasionally give me some credit for it. But, I would like to stress there are lots and lots of other people working very hard that probably deserve just as much credit.
Yeah. There you go. Matt Curtis has said, is there a player in the past that you wished you'd got to manage and didn't?
Cool. I'll tell you a player. I don't know, I've got to be careful. But every year you try and get players into the squad. You know, I always try and look to get one new player in just to freshen it up.
Yep.
Players, I like to bring in a new player just to freshen it up if I can. One player I always thought was a really, really good player. He was a lad, and I had a chat with him. And I thought he was going to sign for us, but in the end he didn't. Was Mark Francis.
Right. Yeah.
He was a player. In the end, he decided not to come to us. But I at one point I thought he was going to come to us.
There you go.
But I like to add him in my team. He was a good player.
Yeah. So who else have we got? We've still got quite a few to go through. To be honest, there's absolutely loads on there. Paris America's then asked again. Does he still remember my assist to Tion outside of the boot from 25 yards? Said it was one of the best he'd seen. Ransom's title winning season.
Well, again, a few years ago, Parrish was a really good player. I'm sure he still is. I haven't seen him recently. But yeah, he was a good player. I remember that goal. I do actually remember that goal. But yeah. When you've been around, when you've sort of coached for a long while, you meet various players, and that's part of what I enjoy. You meet players at various clubs, and you have fond memories. And Paris is one of those characters and one of those players that I always look out for because, he's a good player.
Yeah, we got Riz Clarkey. He's asked, what does he think of his son's Jack Warnock's footballing ability?
Oh my word! Actually, I mean, Jack is actually an example. So Jack, growing up, he loved his football. He was always involved, because I've always been involved with football, even when he was about 4 or 5. As soon as he could walk, he was always in our change room and was around me on a Saturday afternoon.
Right.
So he loves his football. And he played at youth level, and he did all right, but he wasn't what you would say the most gifted or talented player. But he then went to Ipswich in the community, ran a futsal scholarship program, and Chris Ely ran it, and he did a really good job. And Jack was playing futsal 4 days a week when he went into college. And he developed really, really well, and proved that if you put your mind to it, you can develop. And over those years, he developed really well. The thing about Jack is that physically, he went in the gym a lot and developed fairly well. And so, therefore, if he went for the ball, he got the ball and the man and anything else in between. So he didn't really worry about what he took with him. So you wouldn't get in the way of him. But yeah, he proved that if you work on your game, you can actually improve your technical ability quite significantly.
Brilliant. Final two we've got on this. So actually, this one is not a question, but we've got Dan Steed who's sent in a message saying, looking forward to this one. John is a top bloke who has helped me both on and off the pitch this season. tried to sign me for years, signed me this season, and then forgot my name. #legend. Absolutely brilliant. What's that name about?
That is a common theme in my team talks, or sometimes in the change room. I'm not the greatest with names, and players get called various different names.
Brilliant. And we've got the final question on here.
My
Go on.
The clock was about to strike 10, so you might want to edit that out, but I'll let it chime.
So we've got the final one on here. Tom Parkington. John has done such a brilliant job and built a fantastic club at Sporting A7, but what is his proudest moment to date?
I was part of the county side management team when we won the national twice. We won at Derby County for the first time in 50 years that Suffolk had ever won the under-18 championship. So, and then 2 years later, we retained it, or we won it again at Man City's ground on Main Road.
Wow.
So they were proud footballing moments. For me personally, with Sporting, I remember. So I've got a player called Sam Marsden, and he's played, as I say, nearly 400 games for me. And I went to his wedding about 2 or 3 years ago, and we were sat on this table, and it was a whole Sporting table. There was about 15, 20 lads. And John Malone, who is a player who came to the club, was a really good player. He scored 20-something goals one year. But then moved away, was at the wedding, and he came up to me during the wedding service, during the reception, and he said, look at this. He said, this should be one of your proudest moments, John. He said, look at all these lads here. There's 15 or 20 of them. He said, and they'll all tell you that they're all mates because of Sporting and the club and everything. He said, look at them. And it did make me proud that he realised what a good bunch of lads we'd got. Do you mean? So that moment, I remember sticking in my mind thinking,
Yeah, it's brilliant that one of your favourite moments is not even something to do with the actual pitch itself. I think that just speaks volumes, doesn't it, really, to be honest?
Yep.
Well, I don't know. But I remember being proud at that moment for thinking that he'd recognised what a good bunch of lads they were, do you know what I mean? And they were all his mates. So
definitely. Adam, any final questions that you've got? We've had some brilliant Twitter questions. That honestly, the most we've had for any guest. You should be proud of that, John. But any questions from yourself, Adam?
No, I mean, we were asked to get you on because we were told you'd give it an honest and a good open account of things. And I definitely feel like we've had that tonight. We've had some great opinion as well on how football should go forward and also why it can't go forward at the moment, which has been good, refreshing.
Yeah, definitely echo that. John, I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's been a really, really good listen. I hope that people at home who are involved in the SIL have enjoyed listening to this one as well. And as I said, thank you so much for all of the Twitter questions that you've sent in. Honestly, there's been so many. We had to have a whole part of the show just purely dedicated towards that. I had to kind of trim down what we were talking about just so I could get in everybody's questions. So I think that's just testament to your standing in the SIL and what you've done. But thank you for coming on. I hope you've enjoyed it.
It's always good to see you, James, and thanks as much, Adam. Yeah,
no worries.
I actually got your names right, so I've done well tonight.
But yeah, if you guys have enjoyed the video, make sure from a YouTube perspective that you hit the thumbs up and leave a comment for your favorite part from the podcast, and also subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to this on any of the podcasting platforms, then make sure you leave us a 5-star review and also subscribe as well. If you want to take that support a little bit extra further, you can do that either via Patreon or via Podbean. All of the links for those will be in the description below. Thank you very much for listening, and as always on the channel, until next time, adios.